they like me back, warmth, positive energy. So it's quite an interesting list. And the reason I've kicked off with this list and kind of getting you to think about somebody you get on with really well and the attributes that they have is that we all have these attributes. So this list I've got here and the things that Renee's talking about, we all have that capacity. You know, we all have the capacity to be inspirational, to be joyful, to be kind, to have positive energy, to be spontaneous, to be wise. You know, we have those attributes. But what is it that stops us from really being present and showing up in our lives? This is all about being present, and it's all about showing up in our own lives. So what do you think is preventing us from doing that? I mean, the answer may be quite obvious, obviously because of the nature of the webinar. But what stops us from being present, fully present in our own lives? Stress, a lot of work. Okay, yes, and what you're talking about here are major distractions. So these can be, you know, the things that stop us from being present, from actually showcasing these attributes that we all have, is because there are other things happening, and they are distractions, and some of these distractions do cause stress. In fact, many of them cause stress, or we can feel overloaded with work. There can be many things that stop us from, or prevent us really from showing up in our own lives and being this person. So I wanted to kick off with that because this webinar is about dealing with distractions effectively. Social media, yes, it's a big culprit. And, you know, to just understand how we are distracted, why we get distracted, when we're distracted, and how we can make some changes that will actually have a really immediate impact on our productivity levels. And Grace, what you're saying about worries is that this is another thing that can cause distraction, because if we've got worries and challenges in our lives, it's much easier to use distraction to avoid having to look at those more closely. So again, that can stop us from having this or showcasing this lovely list of skills. So I'll come back to that, but to talk about this webinar first of all, these are some things I want to address. So we'll do some introductions in a moment. I want to talk about why distraction has become such an issue, why it's an issue now. And we probably know the answer to this, and we're probably all guilty of why it's become such an issue, but we're going to talk about that and talk about, oops, sorry, it's my thing going crazy again, hang on. Let's get back here. Yeah, and talk about the impact of distractions. So what impact that has on our ability to be productive, on our relationships, and our ability to showcase those lovely attributes, and therefore why we need to actually manage it and be better at managing it. Dopamine plays a very big role, which I'll come on to, and part of managing distraction is being able to understand how dopamine works and understand actually how we need to be very much in charge of the things around us that create that distraction. And I'll share some tips and tricks from my own experience that you may want to try. And we'll finish off with some resources. And I have actually got a handout that goes with this webinar that you'll get afterwards as well. A little bit about me. Most of you know me. I'm Emma Sue. I'm director of Unimenta, the website through which you sign up for these webinars. And I'm also an author of 7 Skills for the Future. I'm a trainer, consultant, and do a whole bunch of different things. And I am just as prone to distraction as everybody else. So I'm not exempt from it. So, you know, when it comes to really being effective and showing up in our own lives, probably distraction is fast becoming the #1 barrier. And that's partly because we are all busier than ever. So work overload was mentioned earlier on. And the distractions are just more, there's just more of them, you know. And social media and our smartphones do play a big role in that. And I guess, you know, the issue here is that technology is a wonderful thing, and it gives us so many great things, you know, but it also gives us the ability to do anything we feel like at any time. So we don't really have any sort of parameters around it. You know, we can just, you know, if, whatever we want to do, we can do it, you know. So if we want to look up something on the internet, we can do that. If we want to check email, we can do that. Instant messages, send a text, you know, we can do all of that. And the problem is that every time we do it, it tweaks the novelty-seeking, reward-seeking centers of our brain. And that's what gives that hit of dopamine, which I'll come on to later. So in many ways, we can't actually help it. You know, our brains are hardwired to be distracted. And the dopamine hit is very, very powerful. And so this has taken a big hit on our ability to manage time, and manage time well, and to be productive. And as Hyatt's saying, you know, we like to procrastinate. And that brings me on to what I was talking about earlier. We actually like to be distracted. You know, we do like to procrastinate. You know, we're very prone to it, and we like to be distracted. And like I said earlier on, and as Grace mentioned, you know, sometimes life's not easy. You know, we do worry, or we're facing problems. And that's when it's the easiest thing to use distraction as a way to avoid being present and avoid showing up in our own lives. So sometimes being present means accepting that perhaps we're not feeling great right now, and to actually maybe take action on that. So distraction is not only an issue when it comes to productivity, but it's also an issue when it comes to self-awareness and being able to manage stress well, you know, and manage some of the worries that we face. Okay, so let me ask you this question, and feel free to put this in the chat box. What was one of the first things you did when you woke up this morning? One of the first things, not the very first thing maybe, but one of the first things that you will have done, I'm guessing, when you, or just after you woke up this morning. Yeah, so that's pretty much the message, the answer I was expecting, checking my phone for messages. So most people do that. Most people, some people do it the minute they wake up, like my husband, and many people, and other people do it within, you know, within an hour of waking up, perhaps, you know. It's a very, very, very immediate and common thing to do. And part of the problem with distraction is that our smartphones, you know, we've become very dependent on them, you know, so they're like Swiss Army knives, and you know, they do so much for us. You know, they're a web browser, they're a calculator, they allow us to check email, calendars, you know, videos. They do other things like voice recording and guitar tuning, and, you know, think about all the apps that you might have on your phone and how much you're opening those and using those, not to mention all the social media and so on. So they're really, really powerful, and they do more things than the most advanced computer that IBM could ever have thought of 20 years ago. You know, so it's a really quite relatively recent phenomenon that we have this device that can do everything. In actual fact, believe it or not, smartphones have actually only been around for the last 10 years. So 10 years ago, you know, we didn't have them. We had phones, but we didn't have smartphones. So we use them all the time, and it creates this kind of mania for cramming everything we do into every single spare moment of time. So what happens is, very often when we have a little bit of time, we will reach for our phone. So, you know, we've become very bad at just having time when we are perhaps just in the present, because we are constantly looking at our phone, and it's a compulsion, and it's something that affects all of us. And we have to be aware of that and have to be mindful of it, because it also creates stress, because unfortunately when we're checking all the time, it puts our brain into a kind of constant alert, which is not good, because you become very reactive, and it's not a very healthy way to be. The number one skill that we lack when it comes to managing ourselves and our time is this ability to focus, and it's actually becoming one of the #1 skills that are sought after is the ability to focus, to actually focus on something and to persevere and to complete a task. It's becoming really hard for us to do that. So it's, you know, and it also affects just even having a conversation. You know, we find it difficult to focus, even just having a conversation. So another question to ask is, how many times a day do you think you reach for your smartphone? And you can respond to that in the chat box if you want to. If you have an idea of how many times you reach for it, maybe you have one of those. I think Apple now do have a way that you can actually measure how much time you spend on your phone or how many times you reach for your phone. But some of you can't count how many times you reach for your phone. Chris is saying about 100 times. Okay, so you know, this has become a sort of habitual thing that we do, you know, just reaching for the phone. And notice the word reach, you know, because it is about actually going and reaching and picking it up. And Renee says she's not sure she wants to know, which is fair enough. You can actually get these apps that can tell you how often you reach for your smartphone. You may be surprised with some of the results there. But sorry, it's just jumping around a bit. But we tend to actually underestimate by about 50% how often we reach for that smartphone. So whatever you've said there is probably double that, you know, it's probably double that. And, you know, for over 50% of us, it's several hours a day. So if you were to add up all the times that you reach for your smartphone, it would come up to several hours and up to 250 times per day. Now, I actually do have an app that measures how many times or how much time I spend on my phone. And I try to limit it to an hour and a half a day, but it often creeps up more. And I noticed actually recently when I was on holiday that I was looking at it a lot more. I was doing a lot more with it. Which did make me feel a bit edgy sometimes. I didn't quite like it, but you know, that's probably not very much compared with a lot of people. So people say they can't bear to be without their device, can't imagine being without their device. Another interesting thing, because research shows that if you can have times when you keep your phone physically away from you, so not actually near you, because it's that reaching, you know, it's that reaching that we do. So if you can't actually reach it, then you're not going to look at it. So actually having the phone physically away from you sometimes, and consciously doing that is not a bad thing to do. So it impacts our attention spans, it impacts our memory, and our ability to be present. So it has a huge impact on our lives, and this is why we need to be much more aware of how how often we are reaching for that phone. Yes, we need to use it. Yes, we have lots of uses for it and functions on it that we want to use, but it's just being much more conscious and conscientious about how we use it, because the constant use of them can make you feel quite edgy. And I notice that myself. I do notice it, that when I'm looking at it more, I can feel a bit jittery, a bit irritable, a bit edgy, because it puts you on this constant alert, and it's your brain that's doing that. Okay, so it is something that we have to learn to manage and control, because it's our brains that really, really want to reach for that phone. And we tell ourselves that it's really important. You know, we can't, you know, we have to check our email, don't we? You know, we have to check that latest social media update. Do we? But we tell ourselves that we do, right? So let's talk about distraction, and I want to talk here about how it happens. Okay, so this is basically how we operate and how we're distracted. So it happens in two ways. There's an external way of being distracted, which happens through noise. So noise simply means things like, you know, anything from other people, you know, other people coming to interrupt you. That is external noise, but also email, text messages, notifications, browser tabs, videos, lots and lots of things. So noise interferes with our attention, and we simply have a lot more noise now. So external distractions include noise, include interruptions, which can be from other people, whether that's in person or whether that's electronically, or, you know, however that might come. That's an external interruption. and perhaps events that are going on around us that we're aware of. So these are external ways that we can be distracted. The other way that we can be distracted is internal, coming from inside ourselves. And that can happen through what's known as mind wandering. So, you know, we're basically not focused and we're thinking about something else. So that could be happening right now during this webinar as you're listening. Your mind could be wandering and thinking about other things, quite normal. But, you know, we do this all the time. Worry, which is an internal factor for distraction. So worrying about things that either have happened or that we think might happen, or just things that are going on around us. So we think about the past and we think about the future, which means that we're not actually where we are, which is in the present. Okay, so we need to learn how to bring ourselves back to the present, because these are all the different ways that we can naturally be distracted. So there are internal distractions that happen, and there are external distractions that happen around us. So that's a lot of distraction, right? So we're not just talking about smartphones, you know, we're talking about other things that are going on as well, and possible stress factors, and all of these things feed into each other. So the impact of not managing distractions. So if we kind of just keep going as we are, these are the kinds of things that can happen if we don't actually manage it. So generally, we are less efficient. So research shows that it takes about 20 minutes to get back to a task after a distraction, which basically means that everything's taking longer. And we're probably not doing whatever it is as well as we could. So we are less efficient. And you can simply do a calculation there that if you're, you know, let's say you start work on a project and you're working, and then you are distracted by email, or you allow yourself to be distracted. You open your email, or you look at something on your phone, or you know somebody comes and asks you a question. Those are interruptions, and they will set you back by 20 minutes each time they happen. And we're less effective. And we're less effective because we're usually not fully listening, and we're not fully present when things are happening. So, you know, for example, you're at a meeting and you're not really present. You know, you're not focused, you are distracted. You know, many people at meetings, I've seen them, they have their phones there and they're looking at their emails and they're looking at other things. They're not actually in the meeting. Some organizations are starting to ban phones from meetings because it's so bad. But it's simply that, you know, you're just not present in that particular moment. So you're not going to be effective. You're going to miss something. You're going to miss a point where you could have said something or contributed a useful idea, you know. So in that sense, we're missing out. So we might miss out on an opportunity. We might miss out on an important conversation that we could have had. It also impacts our relationships because we're not fully present with that other person. And we can make less effective decisions because we are less calm. So we just are generally more reactive because we are too distracted to make good decisions. So these are just some of the impacts of not managing distraction. And, you know, the biggest one perhaps is this horrible feeling of being overwhelmed and overloaded, which causes all the stress. So these things feed into each other. So the more we're distracted and the less effective we are, the more overwhelmed we feel, the more overloaded we feel, the more anxious we feel. And this is not healthy, and it's not good for well-being, and it's not good for when it comes to performance and being productive. So it's a real issue, and it's something that we see in the workplace all the time. And I would say long term, it probably leads to major stress issues, burnout, all sorts of things that are more extreme. You know, anxiety disorders. All of these things can be exacerbated by not managing our distractions well. You know, they can kind of go into this horrible cycle. So that's what we've got to watch out for, because if our stress levels are constantly being heightened, then it doesn't take long for that to just accumulate and accumulate and accumulate. So living inside your smartphone, which is, I've underlined it as an expression because I think many people do live inside their smartphones, and I see it around me all the time. And you see it when people are walking down the street and they are literally living inside their smartphones. And it just means you're less present with what's right in front of you. And actually what's right in front of you is probably pretty important, you know, because that's the present, that is your life, that's where things are happening. So you could miss out on, you know, a conversation, another person, your loved ones, you know, your children. And you are more likely to be edgy and not particularly focused. And also, if you are really using your smartphone as much as all of you guys are saying that you are, you're not giving your brain a break, you know, which means that you don't have opportunities to be reflective or to be creative or just to slow down. You're kind of constantly in overdrive because you're constantly on the go and everything is right there in your phone. So it's really important to slow down. It's really important to give our brains a break, because our brains are really amazing, and actually they have the capacity to be great problem solvers, to have fantastic solutions to things, to be able to, you know, grab opportunities. But if we don't ever allow them to have that space, then our poor brain just becomes totally overwhelmed. And of course, the big culprit is dopamine. And this is what I was talking about earlier on. So when the brain's presented with an unexpected reward, which is what the smartphone is, because it's unexpected because we don't know what it might be. We don't know who's liked our post. We don't know who has written us an email. It doesn't actually matter whether it's an important email or not. We just like to, you know, we like the unpredictability of it. So it prompts, so every time that you're presented with that, the dopamine increases. And dopamine in small amounts is good because it's actually a feel-good substance in your brain. But too much of it means that you just keep wanting to repeat that positive experience. It becomes this kind of compulsion, really. And every time we get that hit of dopamine, when we respond to our distractions, we're basically teaching our brain to continue to do what it's doing because it feels good. So that's why it can feel compelling to check every time we're aware of a new message or a piece of information. It becomes a compulsion. Our brain thinks it's really important. Actually, a lot of the stuff isn't that important, but our brain believes it's really important. And you know, we can all identify with this example of you know, starting on a project only to flip to email and then to a message and then to a website. Oh, I'll just check that. Or something random occurs to you, you know, a distraction about, oh gosh, what about Auntie Jo coming next week for tea? What am I going to make? You know, what kind of cake am I going to make? And that'll pop into your head, and before you know it, you're looking up a recipe. But by the time you've done that, you've lost momentum and you've lost concentration on what you're originally working on. So it'll now take you 2 or 3 times as long to complete it. And you know, this kind of example doesn't actually include all the other interruptions from other people. So it doesn't include messages and social media and anything else that might be coming up. This is just an example of you working and perhaps looking at a web browser and, you know, checking something, you know. So all of that causes this dopamine rush, and the more we feed that dopamine rush, the more our brain says, hey, this is great, you know, this feels good, let's keep doing that, let's keep checking, let's keep, you know, let's keep scrolling, let's keep doing what makes us feel so good. And it's almost kind of mindless. This is an app which is, I think I've got the name of it at the end. I do have the name of it at the end of the webinar, but it will help you to track how long you spend on your phone. This is actually better, I think, than some of the not device, but you know, the mechanism that you can use on smartphones now that's come out recently, because this actually tells you each day how many minutes you're spending on your phone, rather than, you know, the accumulated amount, or rather than how many times. Actually, this will tell you how many times you've actually picked up your smartphone, so it's really effective. It's called Moment. That's what it's called, Moment, and the name of it will be in the end of this webinar. So we largely make it difficult for ourselves, and these are some of the ways that we make it difficult for ourselves. So we are responsible for causing some of these distractions. So we do multitask, and that was example I gave earlier on about working on a project and then, you know, being distracted by something else that's going on, or looking up a website or so on. The second one is we allow the interruptions. So we don't do anything to put boundaries in place. We don't do anything to minimize them. We just allow them to happen. It's like we're helpless and can't actually do anything about it, but we can. You know, there are things that you can do to help minimize those interruptions, and that's what we need to do, but we don't, because we tell ourselves that it's all important and we don't prioritize properly. So we allow the interruptions. We do feel compelled to check email several times a day. Many people check it even more than that, and only a few people have particular times of the day when they check email. Most people have it open all the time, all the time, all the time. Even while you're watching this webinar, maybe you've got email open. We've also made it normal to be available all the time. So it's really commonplace to respond to emails in the evenings, to respond to work issues in the evenings. So we don't create proper boundaries, and we feel that we need to be available all the time. So that's something we have to be responsible for, is managing those boundaries and not sending out that message to other people. Hey, you know, you can contact me anytime. Actually, no. So we need to create those boundaries. When we're at work, we often don't eat properly, don't take regular breaks. I can't tell you the amount of times that I eat lunch standing up quickly, because I'm usually, you know, I have sort of, you know, particular times of the day when I'm working and I've got 101 things happening. And so I don't necessarily sit down and eat properly. And yet it's so important to do that. And many people don't take regular breaks either, don't even think of taking a break. And those of us who are self-employed or run our own businesses, we're even more guilty of this kind of thing. Because at least if you're working for an organization, hopefully most of the time, you know, there are legal parameters around taking breaks, you know, on a regular basis. And our attention spans are very small, and we don't work smart. So we make it difficult for ourselves by the things that we do, by the habits that we create. And even at home, we can also be very chaotic. So even outside of the workplace, our home lives can lack balance, and we're not prioritizing there either. We're just rushing around from task to task. So it's not just at work that these things happen. And one of the things that is really effective is the practice of mindfulness. I don't know how many of you practice mindfulness, but it's probably one of the number one ways to help yourself be more in the present moment. And it's simply, as John Kabat-Zinn says here, paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally. And that's a practice you can do anywhere, at any time. And it can be as simple as taking some time in the morning when you wake up, or to taking some time when you go on a walk, or just sitting, having that cup of tea, and not actually doing anything else while you're having that cup of tea. So any kind of mindfulness practice will be hugely beneficial when it comes to managing distraction. And probably one of the number one things I would recommend that we all do is every day have points where we actually consciously practice mindfulness. And these are some of the many, many benefits of mindfulness practice, which are all research-based, and as you can see, you know, links to productivity, but also around how we think, how we make decisions, how we communicate, and focus and concentration. So I'm just putting that up as a kind of snapshot so you can see. We'll send you this after today's webinar, so you have some of the sources of this research if you want to read more about it. But mindfulness simply means slowing down, slowing the breath, and being in the moment for as long as you can manage it. 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. It doesn't actually matter. It doesn't have to be a long, long time. So mindfulness, number one, is a great, great way to reduce stress, to help us be more in the present, and to respond more effectively. Another thing you can think about, so I've got a couple of links here, again, which you'll get in the resources, but this is a TED talk by Laura Vanderkam, and she talks about, you know, the fact that we have 168 hours in each week, and how do we find time for what matters most. And it's about, she talks about rephrasing what we say to ourselves and to others. So we tend to say very quickly, oh, I don't have time. I don't have time. Whether we say it to ourselves or say it to other people, I don't have time. Actually, what she suggests is that we change that sentence to, that's not my priority. And just by simply changing the language that we use and how we think about time makes a big difference. Because if you react quite strongly to that, oh, that's not my priority, but yes, it is. Well, then that tells you something about how you're organizing your time. So these are two very, very good resources here for designing your day, planning your day. And I've got planning your day in here as a way to help deal with distraction, because people who are high achievers, so people who are successful and get a lot done and are, you know, yeah, high achievers, they are ruthless schedulers. So they will schedule everything. They will schedule when they check email, they'll schedule when they take calls, they'll schedule their meetings, and they, you know, they do it based on when they're most able to focus. So really thinking about, and this is what David Rock does as well, is scheduling the type of work you need to do during the times when you have the most energy to do it. So for example, I am one of those people, I cannot work in the evenings. I'm just really, really bad at it. And I know that if I've got something that I need to work on, which requires my brain power, then I need to get that done in the morning. And so I will schedule that for the morning, and I will make sure that that important work is done before I do anything else. But we all work in different ways. So by taking control of your time and really using your energy in the right way, you will actually become less stressed, because you'll feel more in control. Because part of the problem with distractions is that we can feel very not in control, and that's what creates the stress. So the minute you start taking control and managing your day, you immediately feel better, and it makes an immediate impact. And one of the most effective tools that you can use is simply writing. So some kind of journal or some kind of planning system that you might use. It's very, very powerful. And I like to think of it as setting intentions and goals, so that are both personal and work related, because by writing these down and really thinking about them, reflecting on them, you're more likely to prioritize them, and you're more likely to make sure these things happen and not get caught up in the sort of endless cycle of the distractions and the interruptions. So this is, you know, you can do this weekly, you can do it daily, you can do it quarterly. I have a great journal which I started at the beginning of the year, and I actually had sort of several things that were important to me to achieve this year, or to, you know, make sure were in my life this year. And I'll keep flitting back to what I wrote to make sure that I am actually aligning what's happening in my life now to what those things that were there at the beginning of the year. So writing is very, very powerful. Try and do it before you go out into the day, and try and do it at the end of the day. So just another great thing that I think works really, really well. So managing your distractions. So let's just look at this for a moment. So, you know, if we know that it takes 20 minutes to, you know, take on a task after we've been interrupted, then that means that we can at least start to perhaps push some of these distractions to other times of the day. So that simply means that, you know, you can schedule time in your calendar, in your day, for email. You can schedule time for social media, rather than it being a constant presence that is just with you all day long, which it is for most people. It's just with them all day long. And I know that because I know that, you know, I do use social media, but what I notice is that every time I use it, everybody else is always on it. And I can't, you know, which sort of tells me that they must be always on it, you know, when I'm not on it. But, you know, it's actually just having time in your day when you think, okay, this is when I'm going to be looking at email. And you can try out different things. So you can try, for example, you can say to yourself, okay, this week I'm going to experiment with checking email just once a day, and I'm going to see what happens if I do that. And it might feel a bit uncomfortable, but the point is that you're trying out different strategies and seeing what works and what doesn't work and how you can do it. You know, another study found that people spend 47% of their time on the internet procrastinating. You know, when they're sort of, you know, doing other things on the internet. So most people, again, if they're working on something important, they will disconnect from the internet. They'll just turn it off, or they'll use some of these apps that help you, you know. Are they always on it, or does it tell you they are always on it to make you feel you should be? I don't quite understand what you mean. I guess that's my perception of it, that I feel I should be because other people are on it. I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure I understand the question. Okay, so another way of managing distraction is to get out of the habit of doing everything yourself. So, you know, you can be thinking about what can other people do around you to help, whether that's at work or whether that's at home. So, you know, most things can be outsourced. You know, they can be outsourced to other people who can help you, whether that's cleaning or whether that's writing something or just supporting you in something, or even having a virtual assistant. You can get help so that you're not always doing every single thing yourself. This probably is very important for those of us who are freelancers or running our own businesses, because it's very easy to get into the habit of thinking, I need to do everything myself, I need to know everything myself, but you don't. So an example is, you know, earlier this year I ventured into a new skill, which was podcasting. And I made an immediate decision that I wasn't going to learn how to do the technical side of podcasting, because I knew that would just cause me more work, more stress, and that right now it was more important to focus on the content and to allow to outsource the editing process to somebody else. So think about, you know, are there things that you could stop doing yourself? Change your schedule. So this is just, you know, thinking about what you could be doing. So, you know, could you go to bed earlier in the evenings? Could you wake up earlier instead if you're more productive in the morning? Could you turn the TV off earlier in the evening so that you can perhaps be either go to bed earlier or using that time to do something else? So it's just thinking about how you're using your time and what your schedule's like. Is there anything that you could change, and how could you make it more productive? So again, these are things that will help you to feel more in control, because you are in control of your schedule, you are in control of your day, not other people, you are. So one of the problems with checking your phone first thing in the morning and checking email first thing in the morning is that you've immediately put other people in charge of your schedule. You know, that's basically what you've done, because you've got their you know, you're putting their demands at the forefront of your mind, when actually you need to be focusing on, how am I going to spend my day, how am I going to plan my time, how am I going to be effective today? And this is why I never check email in the morning, never check my phone first thing in the morning, because I need that time. I just need that time to process and to be thinking about how I'm going to spend the day ahead. So I want to tell you some easy things that you can do to help control the dopamine loop and to get more productive. So I've tried all of these at various points in the past year, and I found that it's been quite transformative. You have to come up with your own ideas. These are things that have worked for me. They may or may not work for you, and you have to find what works for you. But one thing I would say is definitely recommend the mindfulness. That's really, really important. But also I would say that, judging from some of the things you were typing in the chat box at the very beginning of the webinar, I know that you may well feel quite overwhelmed and stressed by all the distractions that are in your day. And that's why it's crucial that you have some strategies. It's crucial that you have some ways of setting boundaries and managing some of those distractions. So can you guess what the first thing I did was, and I still do. Any ideas what I may have done? Take the apps off my phone. Well, actually, this is all about taking email off the phone. So I don't have email on my smartphone, therefore I can't check it. Okay, and many people, when I tell them that, they're like, "What do you mean? What on earth do you mean? How could you, how on earth could you remove email off your phone? That's impossible." But actually, if you remove it from your phone completely, you will be far less likely to check it first thing when you wake up. It's simple as that, because you just don't have it on the phone. And checking it when you first wake up is probably the worst production sucking thing you could ever do to start your day. Okay, just if there's one thing you need to stop doing if you're doing it, is checking your email first thing in the morning. There's absolutely no need to be checking your email at that time of day at all. But if you don't have email on your phone, you're just going to be a lot more disciplined about when you check it and when you respond. So I can only check my email through my computer, which means I've actually got to physically go to my computer and go onto it and look at my email. And because I do it like that, it's much, much easier for me to set up filters and mailboxes, which gives me more control over my email. So when I had it on my phone, it drove me absolutely nuts. It really did, because it was just not just work email, it was all the other email, and not just all the other email, it was all the junk email. It was email after email after email, and I hated it, and I was just constantly checking it, and it stressed me. It really stressed me out. And taking it off my phone is probably one of the best things I've ever done. It's just really, really good. So that's one thing I've done that's worked really well for me. You may not feel that's something that would work for you. That's okay. You don't have to do that. But you might want to think about when you check your emails, or when you choose to check your emails, or just have your phone turned off, as Grace is saying. So many people, believe it or not, many people don't actually turn their phones off. They just plug them in to be charged. They don't actually turn them off. Actually, there is an off phone. There is an off button on your phone. You can just turn it off and put it away, and then turn it on when you're ready to look at it. So, it sounds a bit radical, doesn't it? But it's quite simple. Just turn off your phone. So the second one, can you guess what I did for number 2? Yeah, this is turning off notifications. So every time you hear that ping of a text message, every time you hear that social media update or LinkedIn update or whatever it is, because you have those for every single app, right? Every single app you got on your phone can give you a notification, and they will drive you crazy. They really will drive you crazy. So take them off, because every time you have them pinging at you, you're feeding your brain again. You're feeding that dopamine in your brain. So your brain will feel compelled to find out what it is. So that word compelled is really important here, because to some extent you can't, your brain can't help it. Therefore, you've got to control what happens so that your brain can't do that. Yeah. So, every time you get that notification, your brain will feel compelled to find out what it is. It's usually not important, actually, not that important, but your poor brain doesn't know that. So, one of the byproducts of all this unnecessary information overload is that our brains can't distinguish between what's important and what isn't. So everything becomes important. That the cat video is just as important as the important email from a client. That they take on equal importance. So, the time that you actually need to spend working will get eaten up by someone's newsfeed video or LinkedIn update. So it's good that, Hyatt, you do it. And I would recommend, this is something that's worked really well for me. I found it really stressful having all the notifications on. And my 12-year-old son has just recently got his first phone. I put it off for as long as I possibly could. But I'm teaching him some of these things, so that he learns good habits. So all his notifications are off, doesn't have them. So number 3, what do you think number 3 is? So this is slightly more radical than the first two. Yeah, remove all the apps. Okay, so remove apps. So social media apps in particular, they take up huge amounts of space on your phone anyway. But I do find, so when I say remove apps, I remove them, but I sometimes bring them back. So I don't remove them all the time, but I remove them when I find that I'm checking too much. So Facebook, for example, when I had the Facebook app on my phone, I simply found I was checking it more. I was checking it more frequently. WhatsApp. Yeah, WhatsApp is great, but again, I think the biggest issue with WhatsApp is the notifications, so I just turn those off. So I completely understand that, you know, sometimes you need to have some of these social media apps, but what you could experiment with is just turning off, or just not having it for a while, and just see how it makes you feel. So when you say, because Renee, you're saying I couldn't live without WhatsApp, that's a really strong statement, isn't it? I couldn't live without it. You probably could, actually. So it's quite good to just try things out. You know, try having it off your phone for half a day, you know, or just having some time out away from it. But the point is with Facebook is that when I don't have it on my phone, I simply just don't check it. I just don't even notice that I don't have it, you know. So it's really quite, for me, that's quite interesting, because I'm not actually that interested in Facebook, but I find that when I have the app on my phone, I just want to look at it. So if it's not there, I then have to go to the website to check the newsfeed, which is a little bit of effort. And that means that I'm simply consciously making a decision to check my social media rather than mindlessly scrolling, because what can happen is that, you know, you have a spare moment, and instead of being mindful, you just start checking your social media one after the other, you know. I also found, by the way, that when I took Facebook off my the Facebook app off, I would start looking at other apps that I don't normally look at. So I start looking at Twitter. I don't even look at Twitter, but if I didn't have the other app on, I start looking at Twitter. So it doesn't actually matter what it is, you know. It's really interesting, but it's you know, social media is a huge time waster, and quite often very negative. So I like to go for whole days, several days, without checking it if I can. But taking them off your phone is really, really effective. And then the number 4 is to simply leave your phone at home, or just have time. And you know, that's something which many people don't do. It's just simply, you know, not having with you. So I go for dog walks in the morning, and I don't take my phone with me. And it just means it frees me up to enjoy the present moment and to practice mindfulness, to get ideas. I get most of my great ideas when I'm walking and when I'm reflecting. It calms me down, it slows me down, it calms me down. And it's a great way to start the day as well. Instagram is a big temptation, because we can only check it on our phones, can't we? We can't actually interact with it very well unless we look at it on our phones. So I try to just be mindful of when I'm using Instagram. I love it. I really like Instagram much more than other social media apps, but I'm just mindful of how often I'm looking at it. But yeah, going for walks without your phone is a really, really good thing. Okay, so I'm just aware of the time, so just a few more things that you can think about and try. I'm just going to go through these quite quickly. But things like routinizing your day. So again, it can help diminish stress, and it minimizes the amount of decisions you have to make each day, because they use up brain energy. So just look at all the tasks that you do in a day, and which are the ones that you could turn into a routine, just something that you do every day. So it just lessens the toil on your brain for making decisions. And it can just be, you know, very minor seeming tasks that become a routine, but just simple things like putting your clothes out ready for the next morning, packing your bag the evening before, having everything on hand to create a nice nutritious breakfast. Just that these things are automated during a busy working day, you know. So routinizing is a good thing to do. Being aware of when a task does need your undivided attention. You know, just try and think of your brain as a computer, really. If you've got lots and lots of programs and windows open on your screen, your computer will sometimes seize up, or, you know, not be much slower, you know, not be fast enough. And your brain is the same way. So when you're trying to perform multiple tasks, and perhaps each of those tasks actually would be better with your undivided attention, your brain will just get overloaded because it can only process information from one channel at a time. So if you've got something that is important that you need to work on, then try to find a time of day where you can give it your undivided attention and then complete that task and then go back to the other tasks. This is quite hard to do sometimes because we're prone to procrastinating. So, but it's just being aware, you know, okay, actually I do have a presentation I need to prepare or a report I need to write, and if I just spend 2 hours on it or 1 hour on it, I'm going to get it done, you know, and just do that until it's done. Do use tools to help you. So, you know, sometimes this does mean investing in more apps, but they can help you, you know. So we don't have apps, but try to help them to make your life easier. So use tools to help you, but there are also some great things that you can use on your computer, like Focus is something you can download, or another one is Pomodoro, which just helps you to time some of the things that you're doing, or blocks out certain internet sites that you can't actually look at them whilst you're working. So I found tools can be quite helpful, but ideally we should get to a point where we don't need them, where we can actually manage things well ourselves. But, you know, if you're not used to doing, you know, shutting things off, then tools can definitely help with that. And just things like, you know, using an app like Moment, which will tell you how often you're picking up your phone, will just raise your awareness, because some of you said, I don't want to think about how many times I pick it up. But actually, it's not a bad thing to know that, you know, even though it might feel uncomfortable. And this is simply allowing your mind to reboot, is just being able to understand that your brain uses energy. So this means every 2 to 3 hours, stop what you're doing and allow yourself to do something completely different, you know, for a few moments, because you're more likely to feel refreshed and you're more likely to feel alert and ready to tackle more. Things like cat naps help as well, help your mind to reboot, or going for a walk helps your mind to reboot. But it will also have a big impact on your stress levels, because you just feel calmer, because you're slowing yourself down. And it's important to remember that, you know, you have to make a conscious effort to do that, because if you have got a big task ahead of you or a deadline, it's far more tempting to not take breaks. It's far more tempting to keep going. So it's quite hard to think, okay, actually I need to take a break here. So Chris says he uses a sand timer. Yeah, that's it is a great idea, isn't it? A sand timer, which just shows you the time trickling away and how much time you've got to spend on something. Very, very effective. I like that idea too. So good suggestion, Chris. Take a brain break. So, you know, most workplaces have a lunch break and they have 2 15-minute breaks throughout the day. Do you ever allow yourself those kinds of breaks? Just a question. Most people don't, you know, I'm probably one of them. But, you know, just using that break time to walk around, go outside, or just close your eyes and practice some mindfulness for 15 minutes. And if you really can't afford a 15-minute break in your day, then just, you know, turn your mind off as you walk somewhere to get something. You know, just give your mind a short little burst of total break from workday tasks. It's really, really important to do that. And the last one, do more with less stress. So this is just about, as what I've talked about earlier on, is organizing work and information so it doesn't overwhelm you and cause unnecessary stress. So this is about tapping into your highest mental abilities and knowing how to do that. Renee's suggesting Headspace app and yoga. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, so regular use of yoga will also help you to calm down. I do yoga at least twice a week, and I can say that it's really made a difference. It's really helped me with slowing down and just being calmer. And Headspace as well is a fantastic app for using mindfulness every single day. So The benefits of doing all this, hopefully, so what can you expect if you do some of the things that I'm suggesting? Well, you can expect that you will have more time to plan your day and prioritize what needs to be done. So that's really, really important, to think about how you spend that very first part of your day. In the podcast this week, the episode this week is all about morning routines. So if you want to know more about that, have a listen to the podcast, and I've got some great suggestions on there for changing your morning routine, because it just sets you up for the day and it makes your day so much more effective. Everything, how you start your day kind of regulates how your day will go. So if you're starting it off in stress and checking stuff and responding to demands, you're just going to go hurtle through the day in the same way. But if you can start your day in a different way with a great morning routine, makes a really, really big impact. So that's the first thing. If you start doing some of these things, you'll find it much easier to unitask rather than multitask. So it'll start to feel less uncomfortable the more you focus on one thing at a time. You'll find it easier to do that. You'll find that you will get lots of ideas and solutions to things that you might be struggling with. So we talked earlier on about feeling worried, which is partly just because we have our brains on high alert all the time. But if you can learn to slow down and give yourself some space, you'll find that actually you do come up with solutions, and you do come up with great ideas. So do trust in your brain to do that for you, because it will. It really, really will. You'll also feel an immediate sense of calm and control. So the minute you start, having times when your phone's not near you or switched off, or you start, not responding to every single thing all the time, you will feel calmer, and that's a great feeling. That's a great way to be, which means that you will actually be much better at responding rather than reacting. And you'll get more done, and you'll have more time for the things and people that matter. So there's a lot of benefits to finding ways to manage our distractions and just become happier as well as more productive. So for me, it's not just about being productive and, getting a huge amount of things done. It's actually about being happier and having less stress and being present. So going all the way back to that list at the beginning of those attributes, those, being someone who's joyful, being someone who's positive, being someone who listens well, who's inspiring, who's spontaneous, all of those things you'll be able to tap into a lot more easily if you can manage your distractions. So we've got some time for some questions if you want to ask any questions, but in the meantime, here are some resources for you, which will be coming to you in a handout as well, which Caroline will send around after the webinar. So just the couple of websites that I talked about, a couple of articles that you can read, and then on the website itself, we've got some free downloads, and we've got a couple of live events, one at the end of this month in Leeds, if you're in Leeds, and one in London on the 28th of June. So just check our What's On page. And we have our upcoming webinars there on the left-hand side. The only one that's subject to change is the one that's scheduled for the 7th of May at the moment. That's probably going to move to the 21st of May, but you'll be notified of that. So do you have any questions to finish off with, or anything you want to comment on? I hope you found the webinar helpful. Thank you, Caroline. Yeah, soft skills, so what, is moved to the 21st of May.